A very warm welcome to all from me, Raga Olga de Silva, or Totally Out Now, as you know me. I'm the co founder and director of Speaking Minds, India's largest international speaker agency, representing speakers and content from all over the world. These are speakers who are out of the ordinary and who share adaptable, actionable, and real life experiences. Now we've taken you to the other side with so many of our talent. Nandita Das, Lisa Ray, Milind Soman, Karen Jacobson, remember? The Direction Girl, the Siri Girl, Mark Ingalls, Madeline Black, Atul Khatri, Tulsi Vagyani, and Ila Arun, and so many more. Now today we have someone amazing, someone who breaks all stereotypes, war, frontline, woman. So it gives me immense pleasure to invite Sue Turton. So,
I
how
don't
are
think
you?
you're very extraordinary at all, Raga.
That is extraordinary when people who are extraordinary say they're not extraordinary, isn't it? So where are you? I want to see where are you?
Yeah, I'm really lucky. I mean, I've been stood out on my own for all these months like everybody else, but I am sitting on the River Thames on a barge that I live on. So, I have lots of geese and ducks and swans to talk to at least every day as they swim past, and the tide goes up and down a couple of times a day.
So you're in a different kind of war zone, isn't it?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's nobody shooting. There's nobody shooting, or there's no gunfire here. But I mean, everybody's going through their own personal war at the moment, are they?
Sure.
With what's happening, and they're all trying to survive in whatever way they can.
Sure. So one of the questions I always ask you, Sue, and I know that you have asked you like this 100 times already. So it keeps cropping up for me, and I keep thinking, why would a TV presenter like you, in a glamorous, that's how I saw you, years and years ago as well, glamorous presenting role, why would you don that helmet, which I want to see, obviously, and get shot at, for instance, by ISIS in Syria? Why would you even do that?
So I've been in TV news pretty much over 30 years, and I think as a journalist, if you're going to keep going, the one thing that makes you want to keep going is you believe that the stories you're doing are important. You have to give your life to it if you're going to get really stuck into important stories. And I came to war journalism quite late on. I'd already been working for Channel 4 News for 12 years and other stations before then, doing all sorts of different stories, covering different areas, whether it was documentaries, breaking news, in undercover, sports news, different areas. And I thought, I could do this for another 10 years, or I could do what I've always wanted to do, which is go into places where it's life or death, and where you kind of think these stories really matter. And I didn't know how I'd cope, because everybody has an impression as to how they might do if their life is under threat, whether it's on the front line and somebody's going to blow you up, or there's a threat of kidnap or whatever. And I wasn't sure how I'd react. But I found I actually suited it. I was quite matter of fact about it. And I think the worst thing when you're on the front line is if your imagination runs riot and you think, oh no, what could happen here? If you don't think like that, but you just think very matter of factly that I need to get from here to there, it's very dangerous. So what's the most sensible and safest way to do that? Let's get all the advice we can and hook up with the right people, and then we should be fine. If that's your brain, then I think you'll do okay. And just one other sort of line that I often say, and you've heard me say this many times, people say, but you're a woman.
Yeah.
How come you are brave enough when some men aren't? And I always reply the same way, that quite a lot of women in their lives have had to face scary places, scary people. They might have been bullied. They might have been attacked. They might have had to deal with things in their home situation that took a lot out of them.
Sure.
And you find that sometimes it's those women who might not look like they can cope with a dangerous situation that do the best. Sure. And it's the guys who are big and strong and look like they will be fine, and their imagination runs riot, and they say, I'm not going any further, I'm going the opposite way.
But so women are known to be far more resilient than men, right? I mean, I know of so many stories where people say, I'm an alpha man, and they're put into situations and that alpha manhood, I don't know where it disappears. But
They fail.
yeah, but I just want to understand before, see, this all sounds glamorous to us. We are sitting in our living room watching war stories. For us, these are stories, right? It's like happening on a screen. But you are actually making a choice to go there. It's a choice that you have made. How do you mentally prepare to make a choice like that?
Again, I mean, I suppose the ego kicks in, if I'm honest. My old boss at Al Jazeera always used to say, is the risk worth the story? So you would sit there beforehand and go, yeah, I really think that has to be told. There's nobody there at the moment. There's nobody covering up. They're not getting their voices out. We don't know what's happening. It's like now, most of us who have worked in that environment are so worried that the world is looking inwardly. We're all worried about our own survival. And the things that are going on while we're not looking outwards really worries me at the moment. So I think it's a question when you're going to go into those places that you think, I really need to tell this story and I want to be the one to tell it. There's the ego. I want to be the one that gets in there and says, this is important. Look what's happening. Or on the flip side, I have people who I've seen probably a dozen times in Syria who have kept me alive when I've been in there, who have looked after me, let me sleep on their floor with my crew, fed me even though they've had very little, because they really wanted us to tell the story of what was going on with their community. And this is a place deep in Idlib that these people now, call me their sister. I care very deeply about them. And so there are places that you cover and people that you've met that you feel honor bound to keep their story alive. So it's the two things, I think, because you can't help but get caught up in the stories that you cover.
Sure. But how do you maintain your sanity through all this?
Well,
it's an assumption.
Yeah. I'm going to say something not very PC right now. Drink. My occupation has a great reputation for drinking, and we do tend to bury our heads in a bottle when we get out. Also talk. I mean, the one thing we are very good at is when we get around the table, coming out with that lovely line, yeah, but when I was in such and such, and it all becomes a bit of a one-upmanship. But it helps to talk, and it also really helps to talk to people who have been in the same situation.
Sure. But
so we will go to people who have also covered topics.
Sure. So journalism was a very safe place, right? For years and years, when the media went into conflict zones or war zones, you were protected in a manner. But we have known over the years that you're not protected anymore. There have been cases of kidnapping. There have been cases that happened with you in Egypt, for instance. We'll talk more about that. But then how do you make that choice? And I'm coming back to my original question. When you know that you're not safe, when you know you're not protected, when you know you could be kidnapped and beheaded. So what is that drives you to make this choice?
Again, you know what? When my colleagues have been beheaded or killed, and I don't think there are any of us that have been in these environments where we haven't lost people who we care about. It just makes you angry, and it makes you more determined. It's probably a stupid reaction, but you kind of really want to still keep telling those stories, and you want to keep highlighting what's happened, and especially to the people who are taking and kidnapping and killing journalists. One case was Jim Foley. ISIS murdered him. It didn't make us all run for the border. It made us all really want to keep saying what was going on and exposing what ISIS were all about. So yeah, when it becomes personal, you do have to watch yourself, because that sometimes means you make decisions and you do take risks that you probably shouldn't take.
Sure.
I remember when a friend of mine who I'd worked with a lot, Tim Hetherington, who was in Misrata, and I'd just seen him before he left. He'd been in Benghazi. This is all in the Libyan uprising. And Tim was in Misrata, and he was killed there. And I remember being in Misrata very shortly afterwards and needing to go to where he was killed. which is probably not a very clever idea, but I just sort of felt, I wanted to see it. And that was that was too close. That was too personal, really. So, there is an element that you probably become a little bit more gung-ho when something like that has happened, rather than the opposite, strangely.
Wow. So you've had close shaves with what we call death, right? So I know, I remember that, and it's, I mean, I'm going to ask you lots of questions around that, Sue, as you know, but my question to you now is that Iraq experience that you shared. Can you share that? Can you share with us? Because every time I've heard that, it gives me goosebumps. I think, Sue, are you for real? How could you then go back after that experience? Yeah.
Just quickly, one of the guys that I was with on that experience, I was talking to the other day, and he said exactly that. Yeah. So, well, briefly, I was covering the conflict in Iraq, really close to the Syria border, and with ISIS. And we've been taken up to the top of the Sinjar Mountains, which I don't know if you remember, but the Yazidi community was stuck up at the top of the Sinjar Mountains. And there'd been this helicopter rescue where a lot of them had been lifted off, and it had got a lot of publicity. But this was a few weeks later, and I was talking to the Yazidi commander down at the bottom of the mountain about this. And he said, look, we've got so many families still up there, and ISIS is cutting off the mountain, and they've no provisions, and we desperately need the help of the international community. So he said, I've got a helicopter from the Iraqi military coming. Will you come up to the top and report it? And he said, well, just be a few hours. So I didn't have a cameraman at the time, so I was filming myself and my Iraqi fixer, and we had two security guys with us who are kind of like our security consultants. So we got on the helicopter and we went up there, and the commander said, come down to my frontline position, which was kind of halfway down the mountain. So we went down there and we were filming. And I remember that we got to close to the front line, and we started filming, and there'd been an RPG attack, and a suicide bomber under the RPG attack from ISIS was trying to take the base. And I remember talking to the guys there saying they'd managed to take out the suicide bomber and they'd blown him up. And one guy comes running towards me with a body part, sort of film this, which was all quite gross. I was kind of like, well, there's no use filming that because we're not going to use it. But anyway, we filmed the refugees. I had the story in the can, said to the commander, right, we need to get back to the helicopter position to get off. And he said, no more helicopters today. Now, whether he knew that before he brought us up there or not, we're not sure. But it felt like he wanted us up there so we would keep telling the story of what was going and we wouldn't just disappear. But the problem is we were with him on his base, which was right on the front line. Anyway, he said, don't worry, I'll give you some blankets and you can stay the night. I've got some tea and some rice. And we stayed the night. We got up the next morning and he promised to get us up to the base. And unfortunately, just as we were about to leave, they started shelling his base. So, I mean, they really were. We were in the spread of their tank fire. So we picked up our stuff, our flak jacket and our helmet, and we were running out the back of his base. And they started firing on us. So we were running towards a house, and the people in the house came out running, and they went, go away, they're shooting at you. So we went round the other side of the house and just kept running. And at that point, we had no option but to run up the mountain, which took us 8 hours. And by the time we got to the top of the mountain, there was snow. It was that cold. It was middle of winter. We get to the top there, and the Peshmerga military who are up there say, we can't give you anywhere to stay apart from a corner of a tent where we've got some of our weapons. So we go into this tent, and there are RPGs and AK-47s and stacked up alongside of us. And there are some blankets in there. So we huddle down for the night, get up the next morning, no helicopter. This carries on for about 5 days. And at this point, we were actually quite worried, because at one point the commander came into the tent and said, we're running out of ammunition. And we're quite worried because ISIS has got these bulldozers and they're pushing up new roads up the Sinjar Mountains. So at this stage, it became a little worrying. So much so that my security detail were looking at the AK-47s in the tent, and they said, look, we should have a conversation here, because if the guys in black coming through this tent, we haven't got any choice, really. We're going to get taken, because even if we shot back, there's nowhere to run to, because they will have overrun the mountain. So they said, does anybody want to get taken alive and end up in an orange jumpsuit? And at that point, we all said no. So the decision was that if the guys came into the tent, then we would have to shoot each other. Now, it's one thing saying it, it's another thing actually doing it.
Yeah.
But that was the conversation we had. And the postscript is 2 days later, they managed to get a helicopter up to us and take us off the mountain. But that was 2 days of thinking,
that's a possibility.
This wasn't in the plan, basically.
Yeah. So the audience who are watching this and who are engaging with us, just understand this. For us, it is a lounge kind of a access to what's happening out there. But these are frontline people who actually experience something like that. I mean, this is not just about death. It is about just waiting for something to happen, which is so uncertain. And, it's like somebody's telling you, I'm going to hang you, and you don't know what's going to happen, right? Yeah. And after that, Sue, after that experience, you still go back, and you go back, and you go back. So is that insanity? Is that ego? Or is that Sue Turton?
Well, I haven't been back for a while because of what happened in Egypt. It's sort of, it put the, it sort of put the kibosh on quite a lot of my travel. And I suppose we should probably explain what that was.
Yeah, please.
So covering all the Arab uprisings, one of them was obviously the Egyptian uprising. And unfortunately, after the coup, where they took out the president, the Muslim Brotherhood president, and put in the general's sort of favorite guy, they had a big media crackdown. And amongst that media crackdown, they went for the Al Jazeera team. And I'd left 5 weeks before this. But obviously, I'd been reporting live nearly every day. And they arrested 3 of my colleagues. And we were basically put on trial. I was put on trial in absentia. They were tried in a cage in a prison cell. And we were all given 7 to 10 years. I got 10 years for supposedly terrorism offences. Now, we went through that court case thinking they were going to come up with some sort of trumped up evidence, but they didn't even do that. I mean, I don't even think they thought they'd have to show any evidence, because I think some trials in Egypt last about 10 minutes. But because the world's media descended on the courtroom, they kind of had to go through this ridiculous kangaroo court. But there was nothing for us to argue against, because it didn't really show anything that was of any note. But unfortunately, I still have that offence, that charge, that conviction hanging over me. So there are still quite a few countries, as well as Egypt, that I can't travel to. And it really became quite clear that it's very difficult to cover that area without being able to go to even countries like, the United Arab Emirates, who are friends with Egypt. It's just too much of a risk.
So such a risk you take, right? So right from your own risk to life when you're in the conflict zones, but also something like this. And I know that when we were trying to get you into India via Dubai, you had restrictions. So how do you feel about this? How do you feel about being in an environment where suddenly, out of your control, one, either you are, sorry, I'm going to say the word kidnapped, and then we don't know what will happen to you, or have restrictions in countries where you basically have no control over it. So how do you manage something like this?
Yeah, I mean, the threat of extradition to Egypt wouldn't be funny, because even though I would hope, well, I say that a bit about our British government at the moment, in inverted commas probably, but I would hope the government here would work very hard to get me out. Having said that, I would end up in prison for at least some time, and the Egyptian prison is not somewhere you want to end up. Apart from it just being, quite grim, there's a lot of rape in Egyptian prisons, so it's not something that you really want to contemplate. So yeah, I mean, it's something now that I have been trying in the last year to get a pardon, and before COVID happened, I think, getting close. I've got a contact who's a very senior Egyptian diplomat, and he thought I might have to actually fly into Egypt to get the pardon, but they were working really hard behind the scenes to try and make that happen. But unfortunately, now COVID's happened, it's all gone quiet. So I suspect that will have just gone away. So I think it might just have to be something that I live with, for the rest of my life, to be honest.
But you said there was a 10-year,
yeah, but the only way, it's a 10-year conviction. So I'm wanted in Egypt for 10 years. So that doesn't actually get spent until I spend 10 years in the country. It's not like you can sit at home and if they don't catch you in 10 years, then they say, oh, that's all right. That's it then.
Wow. So did the company that you work with, and I'm going to use the word company here because you work with various media houses, do they protect you? Do they look after you if something like this were to happen?
Yeah, I mean, they all have different levels of protection, I think. Al Jazeera, there is a school of thought in Al Jazeera that if you are either killed or kidnapped or end up being incarcerated in this way, it's almost like an honor. It's like martyr.
Oh,
wow. You're marching your life. Yeah, there is that school of thought, and I'm not saying everybody at Al Jazeera thinks like that, but I think there was definitely a sense that it's not the same as if you've been convicted in the West. The other channels that I've worked for would have had a different view. But sure. Do they protect you when you're in the field? Well, yes, I would say they do. I mean, the last job I had just before all of this happened was working for Channel 4 on a documentary reportage series that's been going 20 years called Unreported World. And so I'm the boss of that, and I have to compile with my team a risk assessment that can be 60 pages long. And it's not just a risk assessment of the people who are going into a dangerous place, but it's also an assessment of the people you interview, the long-term ramifications against them if they speak to you, how you interact with, whether it's children or whoever it is that there may be a risk associated with, whether that be physical or legal or editorial. All of these things you have to go backwards and forwards on. So if you get the idea that when you're going to do a documentary, you just turn up and talk to people and come home, the preparation is much, much bigger. And then when you're on the ground, when I used to go into Syria, I was smuggled over the border. We would have everything that we could carry. We wouldn't have anything else. Everything would be on our back. And we would have a tracking device. And my manager back in the office would sit and watch our tracking device on the screen to make sure she knew where we were. And there's an alarm on that tracking device. So if something happened, we would hopefully just get time to press the button. Sure. And then they would try and work out how to help. I mean, somewhere like Syria was very difficult because, you're on your own when you're in there, but at least they have contacts that they can call and try and do something.
Sure. Audience, please keep on asking us questions, and I will come back to you in the next 10 minutes or so because there's so much I want to ask Sue. So, Sue, one question that comes to my mind right now is that it's a risky situation. It's a choice you make. It's a conversation that you have with your public, your media, and it's a partnership, right? So you both decide that's the choice you've made.
Yeah.
But what happens if you're in a situation right there on ground and you are actually kidnapped? So is that something that's already discussed with the media house before you go, and other measures put in place?
Yeah, I mean, that's what the tracking device is all about, to be honest with you. I remember one time we were in, where were we? Syria. Yeah, it was in Idlib. And we had a faulty tracking device and the battery had gone down. And so it started giving out an alarm. So our guys back at base thought we were being kidnapped. And they'd started to put in all the protocols as to what to do, who to call, who might be locally, what other journalists might be locally, and to sort of spring into action. And thankfully, I think I was about 2 hours later, I rang in to do a check-in call because we do regular check-in calls, and they were furious because they said, you haven't been kidnapped, what happened? And we realized that the device was tricky. But I've been in the position when I did quite a lot of work with a group called Jabhat al-Nusra, who the Americans had decided were Al-Qaeda affiliates and a terrorist organization. Whilst I was with them, actually, which wasn't helpful, but they accepted that they wanted media attention and gave me access, and I ended up getting a lot of access with them, which was useful because it was very much the other side of what everybody else was reporting. But I remember these guys helping us out at one point because an American colleague and her team had been taken hostage in another part of Syria, and they were being accused of being spies. And that American channel got in touch with us, and we managed to get hold of the Jabhat al-Nusra crowd that we've been with to say they're journalists, they're not spies, they really are journalists, we can vouch for them. And that guy actually went to the camp where they were being held and passed that on, and within a few days they were released. So there is that camaraderie. You know, it's interesting when you're somewhere like the UK and you're working as a journalist, your competition is other channels. But when you're somewhere like that, yes, you're all trying to get your own story, but you're all looking out for each other. And if you can help one of your colleagues in any shape or form, everything else gets ditched, and you know that's what you do, because you know they do the same for you.
Sure. So brilliant. So this is a question that I've asked you in the past, and I know it is a very touchy question, but I'm going to ask you because I'm sure the audience would like to know as well. So in a situation when which is basically is a question that I ask myself quite a bit as well, so that you know. So you're in a situation, you're covering war and something really unfortunate is happening, which you can see a child, let's say, is getting, getting in trouble. And what are the choices you have? You have a choice to report this, or you have a choice to rescue the child. So what goes through you? And I'm not saying what are the choices you make, because I won't put you into that situation. But I want to know what goes through your mind, because this is from the other side.
There's a very, very famous book written called The Bang Bang Club in South Africa about a journalist, a gang there who were covering the whole apartheid movement story. And it's exactly that. One of the journalists takes a picture of a baby with a vulture standing next to it. And it becomes a very famous picture. And then the photographer's asked, did he save the baby afterwards? And the whole book is about whether he did or not, because it's a question we get asked a lot, and it's very difficult, it's very difficult to go into a situation and not be human. We're not robots, but there's a balance to that, and the balance is I am sent somewhere at a great expense to the channel to go and get the story. And I say expense because, you have all of that security detail behind you. You have all of that insurance. You have all of that effort to get you right into somewhere. If you just, as soon as something happens, ditch your tools and go off and become a medic or whatever, because we're trained to at least have some basics of medic, then you are kind of letting them down. But you're human. So I would say you try and do both. You try and cover it in such a way, but if there's something you can physically do to help, especially kids, but if there's something you can physically do to help, you're not gonna not get involved. It has to be a balance, because it's like giving all your supplies away and then realizing you can't carry on. You go into somewhere like an earthquake or famine, and you have supplies because it's the only way to keep you going, and your heart's going, I've got to give these people what I have. But you could give away all that you have that will help one person or one family, and then the reporting, which would have helped the whole community or the whole country, then has to stop. Do you know what I'm saying? There has to be some sort of balance. The one thing I did get involved with, and again, this will be frowned on by some of my colleagues, but the family I was talking about in Syria, the community doctor who I stayed with, they were so desperate for baby formula because they were feeding their newborns cow's milk, which is making them very sick, and baby medicines. The doctor was trying to use adult medicines, which are out of date because quite a lot of the stuff that they were sent by the NGOs was out of date. But he was chopping up these pills to give to the babies or the kids because he didn't have any baby formula or any baby medicines. So when I came back, I put on the website the letter that he wrote, all the things he needed, and the reaction was enormous. People from all over the world just wanted to donate stuff. So one of my friends said, I'm taking this off your hands and I'm going to do this. And we managed to get 2 big Pantechnicon trucks full of this stuff. We got it to the border in Turkey. The Turks then hung on for it for weeks because they wanted some sort of backhander. But eventually it went in and we managed to get it, because usually that stuff would have just been taken over the border. But we managed to get one of the rebel commanders to come and escort it all the way to their community. Which was a drop in the ocean if you think about how many years that country's been at war. But at least it was a one helpful drop that that I could help with.
Amazing, Sue. And there's so much more to talk to you about. And I'm going to just take some audience feedback and questions here. I think there is a lot of engagement. And Idens B, which is someone we know called Venkat, he's saying, at any point during your time covering the war, did you ever think, why are you doing this, and wanted to give up? Great question.
No. No, I mean, yeah, I know I'm crazy, aren't I? There are a lot of my friends who put a lot of pressure on me, to say, look, enough. In fact, my first posting was Afghanistan, and quite a lot of them didn't really want me to go there. But then when I became this roving correspondent that was covering conflicts all over, yeah, a few of my friends were questioning it. And so, I can see their point, but, sadly, I don't have parents. They long passed. And my brother just thinks I'm nuts. So, I'm not really letting anybody down. And no, I mean, if the call rang today and said, do you want to go to Yemen? There is only one answer.
Yes. You're crazy. So this Ravi Kamboj, who says it's so scary to watch in the movies, can't imagine in real life. So why do you keep going back? It's like a mountaineer, always addicted to going back. Is it the same for the war journalist? Ooh, is it an addiction?
Yeah, no, a lot of people ask that as well. Is it an addiction? I think if I had been doing it in my 20s, then I might have felt that way. I think because, I was in my 40s, well, late 30s, 40s, and now early 50s, that it doesn't feel like an addiction. No, it just feels like, what are you going to report on? What stories are you going to tell, and why? And in the end, you just want to tell stories that actually make a difference. It's what I began by saying, and that's the reason. That it's not, I want the adrenaline of getting shot at. I don't much enjoy getting shot at, weirdly.
Oh, no. Oh, how
yeah, I mean, I really don't. Or any of that goes with it. I remember being in Liberia and getting arrested. And was being frog marched to a station where there had been, I knew there'd been torture in this police station. And I ended up being very British and sort of screaming that, how dare they treat me in this way? And, what do they think they were playing at? And in the end, we got released before any torture happened. But I remember getting back to the hotel and immediately, my legs gave way. I mean, there are times when you are running on adrenaline and then you suddenly realize it and you sort of slightly collapse. And yeah, I mean, they're great stories to tell in the pub, but at the time it's not funny, so I don't desperately need to feel like that again. But what I do need to feel is a sense of pride, or a sense of being needed, maybe. I don't have any children, and then maybe this is what I do to fulfill that need, to make you feel like actually your life's had some meaning.
Wow. So this gives you meaning. This is a sense of purpose for you, right? It gives you a sense of purpose, Sue. And I can see that. And I've had many interactions and conversations. We've traveled together, so I understand that. So so I'm going to come back, and I've got lots and lots. I'm sure we're going to go over time because there's so much to know from you. We've got Raj Singh Rawat, who's saying, any situation in which you have or bound, basically, did you feel bound to use weapon to protect yourself? Did you ever feel that?
No, I wish I had one here, but I don't. My weapon is my pen. You know, my weapon is what I say, and when I'm given an audience via a channel, or if I'm writing or what I'm doing, that's my weapon. And yeah, okay, you could say, well, yeah, if you're going to be kidnapped or whatever, surely you ought to be armed. But the thing is, if you're going to, you have to be prepared to shoot somebody, and that I don't think I could do. You know, that conversation we had earlier about, you know, we're going to shoot each other. I don't think I could have actually shot somebody. Yes, I think they would have shot me, but I don't think I could have shot somebody. So there's no point, really. You know? And you don't need journalists to have a reputation for carrying weapons.
Yeah.
Because that means you're in the war then. And, you know, we're trying to keep ourselves separate from that and be observers, not partakers.
Okay, two things here. I'm going to get Sue to show us her war helmet. Please show us the helmet.
Yeah, I know it's weird that I happen to have this in the wheelhouse of my barge, but yeah, the one thing that I've got hanging up is my helmet.
Does it give you the feeling of protection, safety? Does it?
This has got a lump out of it now, so I'm not sure this would be very useful anyway. Yeah, I mean, you know, the sort of the most important thing we do carry is the flak jacket, because to some extent it will save your life. You know, I mean, it's not going to save your life from everything, but at least it'll protect the area here that is most important. Although one little addition here, I remember during the Libyan war that we had so many correspondents covering the war at Al Jazeera that they sent new flak jackets. But I don't know if you know, I could get it out, but there were plates in the front and in the back of a flak jacket. They only had enough plates for one plate per jacket. So we worked out that you'd be fine running that way or fine running that way, but you wouldn't be fine switching over. It's a bit of a worry.
Okay, listen, we're making this sound very light. It's not funny, I know. And I just cannot even imagine what you go through when you're in those kind of conflict situations. But I must tell you to the audience, I'm going to make it a little funny. I will never stand next to Sue because Sue is 5'11" and I am half a size. So this is the first time I'm actually on par with you, isn't it? First time ever. See, I'm standing.
I'll go a bit lower. How's that?
I'm standing and Sue is sitting. Okay.
You know, on that point, you know, my old boss, when I was first talking to him, said, I can't send you to war because you're too tall. It's like, what are you talking about? He said,
so that brings me to my next question, Sue. One, you're really tall, right? You're really, really tall anyway. And that's like really tall. For me, you're really, really tall. So does that help you in your job when you go to these conflict situations, right? That's number one. Number two is, have you felt the need to ever, you know, disguise yourself or hide away because of that height when you're so visible?
Does it help? I don't know about hide. I mean, to be honest, being a woman sometimes I think helps because you aren't forgotten. You know, I mean, being a tall woman, maybe that's even better. But when you rock up in the front line and it's just men everywhere, and you're right there at the front, and you're tapping a commander on the shoulder saying, you know, give us an interview. They don't forget you. They often want to protect you. If you can get them past that, then they eventually want to give you the very best, you know, access, which is incredibly helpful. But I don't know if it's been a benefit. Maybe not. I remember when I got measured for a burqa in Afghanistan, a colleague of mine said, we can't send you because they'll charge you a fortune. So he says, I need to send somebody about your size. So he sent his security dude who was about 6'2". This poor security dude had to stand there and get measured for this huge burqa in the shop, which he, you know, I'm not sure was a good look for him. But that brings me on to the second answer. You ask, you know, have I ever disguised myself? When you're in Afghanistan, when in Kandahar and Helmand, I remember we were doing a story from the Taliban side as opposed to the American embed side, which are also done. And, you know, I basically sat in the back of our beat up Toyota, which was one of our crew cars because nobody looked twice, with my burqa on. And my cameraman and my fixer, two Afghan males, sat in the front. and they just looked like two Afghans driving around with their wife in the back, because I didn't have to stand up. So, which was fine. So we could drive through Taliban country and nobody batted an eyelid. And I was filming actually inside the burqa, so what I used to call burqa cam, looking through the little grill. And that was fine. As soon as I got out of the car, they knew I'd give myself away, not just because of my height, because most Afghan women are quite diminutive, but because of the way they walk. Because, typically me, I'm striding along, they shuffle, they really walk in that way. So it was a problem once I got out the car. So I pretty much had to stay in the car, but the disguise was great in the back of the car.
Amazing. So there's a question from Patrick Chetri. He says, what tips would you give journalists who don't report to be a voice for a country, but are spokesperson for the ruling parties? Okay. So what tips would you give a journalist, basically?
So the journalist is working for a ruling party?
Yeah.
Wow. That's a toughie. Because in my world, if you're working for a ruling party, then you're not really a journalist, you're a spin doctor or you're a PR person. Now, Patrick might find that a bit appalling, and maybe we'll get another note from him, because in the end, journalism for me is all about being, not being in somebody's pocket. It's been trying to give a very fair, down the middle kind of opinion of what's going on. And as soon as you become an employee to give that one side, then that's not really being a journalist. That's being somebody who takes the message and pushes that one side of it. So sorry about that, Patrick. I'm not sure I'm the right person to give you any sort of tips on that.
But so that's a very good point, right? It's it's an employee versus neutral opinions or journalism that you do, right? And journalism has to be about a neutral, balanced view. Now, Patrick, I hope that kind of answers your question. If you have any more comments on that, please feel free to write to us. Now, Sue, I'm going to make this a little lighter, and I'm going to come back to many years back in Oxford, when the famous story that made the rounds, where your bottom got pinched in the middle of a live interview. Please tell us more about that. I mean, this audience you must listen to, because this is in modern times in this country, and we're talking about bottom pinching. And how did you manage that, and what happened?
Yeah, they've even got a word for it here called goosing. They all said I'd been goosed. Yeah, it's terrible, isn't it? Yeah, when this happened, because it made the front pages of lots of newspapers. In fact, it hit all the newspapers, even the Sun and the Daily Mail did stories on it. I always thought this was the one thing I'd always be remembered for. And then, of course, I got convicted of terrorism in Egypt, and it all went out the window. However, at that time, it was ridiculously a big story. And it was, I was just covering the floods in Oxford, doing a live report in my wellies, walking through the water. And you can see there's a guy walking up behind me, and I had no idea he was there, but the audience obviously completely could see him. And then he got closer and closer, and then he just grabbed my bum and carried on walking. And I don't remember a lot about it, but apparently I just kind of looked up and almost tutted and then carried on. But it became, quite a story. And the local police commander was a woman, and she rang and she said, "Do you want to press charges?" Now, I did think about it, but, in the end, I thought, well, do I want to make that much fuss? But I did realize that I had to say something, because if I just let it slip, then it's almost like me saying, "That's all right." And any, woman who was in the pub or wherever, and somebody she didn't know just came up to her and grabbed her, well, she wouldn't have any redress either. So I did put out a statement saying a lot of people thought it was very funny, including my friends. But I could see that, it's not acceptable. Yeah. Now, fast forwards, that must have been, 15 years ago, possibly even more. Fast forwards now to, what's come out in the Me Too movement, and how actually we're all now speaking out about things that happened to us, in earlier years. And I'm of that age that I remember being in the industry, where you were physically touched more than would ever be accepted now. And, there was an acceptability about that attitude, which we don't accept now. I think if somebody got pinched live on air now, there would be no question that there would be an absolute investigation. So I suppose what I'm saying in a good way is we have evolved since then. It upset me enormously, I have to say, at the time. Not just because I was all over the newspapers, but it did feel like, I'd become a bit of a national joke. Because it was watched, I think in the end it was watched like 2 million times.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah. And funnily enough, the papers to start with are very sympathetic, but as usual with the newspapers in the UK, they put you up as a hero 1 minute for carrying on and plucky journalist and didn't let it stop her. And then the next minute, when we put the statement out saying this is a bit off, they then went for the juggler and who does she think she is, and get over yourself, and women in Italy have much worse to deal with, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, you can't win. As soon as you put your head above the parapets in the UK, you'll get it shut off. That's what happens.
No, sure, but it also highlighted to me, Sue, that how we have as women put up with so much of stuff, right? Through the years, we just kind of, somebody comes behind you, pinches your bottom, you don't even kind of flinch, you just kind of go on because you're doing your job at that time. We've kind of accepted and felt that this is how, men will behave, and we just kind of tolerate it. And thank you to the Me Too movement that's changed. But also, I think things have evolved, things have changed. And
what I would like.
Please.
What I would like to just add is, before we, sound like we're male bashing, my cameraman, who is a very tall Danish cameraman called Søren, who I've been all over the world with at Channel 4 News, he went after the guy and wanted to punch his lights out. So, I don't just want to make it sound like we're giving all men a bad rep here, because he was absolutely furious, because he knows how exposed you are when you are talking live to a camera and all you can do is concentrate on that lens. And this guy had just kind of abused that. So good on him.
Sure. So, we talk about, I come from a certain community, LGBT community, and we talk about allies. And it's so important for us to all, as women, as individuals, as people, to have allies and supporters for everything. We don't have to stop back and observe and let things happen, right, which are not correct. So in your case, your colleague helped you, supported you, and that's all we need for anything in life. And I'm so pleased that you have someone like that. Now, I'm going to say Richard Brumfitt says she was the ultimate professional, didn't even flinch. And, that's brilliant. Patrick has thanked you for the good tip. Patrick says she's given a good tip, and journalists know their job in India, most of them are puppets. So sad. It is true in the media world in India that, especially if you're working with the government, so that happens. Dave says, what's for breakfast tomorrow? We're going to come back to that, Dave, very soon. Yes. Before we come to that, Dave, I have this conversation, and I want to talk about that because that's the most interesting part of this conversation. The next thing that I want to ask you, Sue, is about India, your love for India, the the undercover investigation that you did with the call centers. Can you share more about that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a long time ago now, but this is something I did undercover for Channel 4. For a dispatches program. And it was when so many of the call centers were being moved from the UK out to India because companies wanted to save money. And we ended up pretending, or I don't know, sort of presenting myself in India as this millionairess who wanted to set up her own call center. And we were meeting all these people that were professing to be able to help us with what they called leads. And leads were hundreds and thousands of bits of information about UK customers that included their bank account number, their bank statement, their PIN numbers, all their personal details that were being smuggled out of the back of these call centers. And so I think we went to 3 different cities across India with lots of hidden cameras. And as I say, there was this woman who, I think I was called Susie Turtle. My company was called Susie Turtle Consulting. Yeah, because we thought if we wouldn't forget and get it so wrong that people would go, hang on a minute, what did he say? And it was close enough. And yeah, I mean, we managed to collar all three groups of people that we talked to, because, this is dangerous. I mean, not just giving it to another person who wanted a separate call center, but criminals would have loved all that information. And in the end, I think it was a court case, and the prosecutor wanted us to go back to prepare in court, but the thing about journalists, I think, usually you let the journalist speak for itself, and then it's up to the prosecutors to come up with the evidence and, chase down the people that you've exposed. So it went very well. Long time ago, Raga. You've got good memory.
Yeah, I do. I know. I know. That's my age, I think. We have one of the other talent we manage called Ila Arun. She's amazing. Next time she's in UK and she's performing, we must connect her to you. Ila Arun is here. She says, hats off to you, Sue. Very challenging job. She's one of the biggest names in folk music in India, and she's
Wow.
working this year. So that's a big thing. And
I'll have a listen.
yeah, absolutely. She's amazing. She really is. And she talks about topics about women and stuff. And she does a lot of theater in England when she comes here with her troupe. Now, Dave, hey, what's for breakfast tomorrow? And food and soundtrack. And we have to talk about it because, my dear friends, in lockdown, when some of us were just waiting for the lockdown to end, Sue has been doing something super interesting. Sue, please tell us more about it.
Well, I
Eggs.
mean, it was super interesting because, like everybody else that lives on their own and is possibly also single, the days just go on and on and on. And, I was getting fed up. My friends will Zoom me or call me or whatever. But in the end, every day is just about working out what you're going to do for yourself. What are you going to eat? What are you going to exercise? Are you going to do any work? And so I started to think, oh my God. And also, I'm one of those freelancers in the UK that the government's offered no assistance to at all. So it really felt like we'd been forgotten. So I just wrote this tweet that said, I had an egg for breakfast. I feel like I've disappeared. If you're single and you're isolating on your own, you're probably feeling the same way. Share your breakfast, guys. And it's just created an avalanche of people who are either feeling the same way being single, or even with people who are living with others. Because I'm not saying, everybody isn't struggling. Whether you're in families or partnerships or marriages or whatever, you might feel like you're driving each other nuts half the time, because this isn't how we usually live our lives. So yeah, it's created this gentle conversation every day now that I say again, what I've had for breakfast. Usually it's got an egg in it. And then I kind of mention some music that I put on, because I try and put a track on of some description first thing, just to give me a bit of a lift. And people have been sharing, and we've shared all sorts of things. But what I've tried to do is not to make it controversial or antagonistic, or it's kind of hopefully a bit of a hug of a tweet, so that I kind of go, guys, I hear you. If you're out there and nobody else hears you, then get involved in the conversation. And it's a couple of days. It's a couple of weeks now. Or Dave will probably tell us it might even be 3 weeks now. I'm not sure. But every morning I think, do I need to do this again? Are people sick of it? But if I don't do it, I get you've gone missing. Where are you? Which is lovely. And one day, one of the guys sent me a bunch of flowers.
But so tell us the first reaction you had. You had millions of likes. Tell us about that.
I think 1.7 million it reached. I think 20,000 liked it and 2,000 replied. Yeah, I mean, I got up that morning. It was a Saturday. I think it was raining, and I got up and I was going to go and do something, and I ended up not leaving my laptop all day, because I thought, if I've asked people what they have for breakfast, I can't not just at least like it or reply to them. Otherwise, they're like, you asked us and you're not even there. So I didn't leave the computer all day. So it kept me, busy. And even today, more. I think yesterday's I got a couple of hundred likes on it, and it's just ticking over. It's just ticking over, and it's not offensive. It's just, as I say, it's just a way of keeping in touch. And maybe people, one guy said he hadn't eaten for 2 days. And we went, oh my God, why not? And he said, well, I'm a cancer sufferer. I can't go out. So people in the conversation all went, okay, where do you live? How can we get stuff to you? Next day, somebody in Devon said the same thing. I haven't got any provisions left. Okay, who's in Devon? Who can look after Lauren? She's out there. She needs help. It's a hug. It's a, look, there's Dave, sort of It's a simple
Yeah.
concept. It is. It's a very simple little thing, but it's not going to change the world. But
But no, but what is the world, Sue? The world is us, right? Individuals, each of us make the world, right? So when you tweet something like this and you have such a great response and you're able to make a difference to people's lives, and you said meaningful life, right? Whether you're in a war zone or whether you are at home and doing something like this, I think you're making a difference. And to me, that is very critical. I also know as your agency that represents you, Speaking Minds, I remember receiving emails for you saying, where can we send Sue some eggs? You remember that? I was like, okay, I also want eggs. They're so expensive in London, isn't it? Okay, then let me just say, Dave Hay says, such a simple concept that brings a smile every morning and creates a bit of. Okay, so that's true. If you want to follow Sue, where do they follow? Where do they tweet you and hear your egg
well,
experience?
it's it's hashtag egg news, and my Twitter is very easy. It's just at Sue Turton. You can't miss it. But yeah, I mean, and as I say, just even my friends will pop up and say, "Oh, Sue, we had pancakes today," or whatever. I'm like, "Oh, hi, how are you doing?" It really has brought people together, and it's made me people ring me from all over the world that I know just to check I'm all right, because I think they were all thinking I was going to jump in the river or something. But it really wasn't oh my God, I'm desperate. It really was we're all in this, and I'm
Yeah.
feeling this way. So I'm guessing quite a lot of you out there are also feeling it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got Anupama Bindra who says, wow, that's an amazing amount of response. Obviously, she's responding to your response. And Dave Cantrell, and I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Dave, says, fun. I read everyone's reply. Hey, how cool that somebody's actually, checking all your responses. But
Yeah.
we learn from this, right? So that's one of the last things that I want to ask you before we finish the session is, in lockdown, there are a lot of us who are, like I said, procrastinating. We are thinking about life. We are not doing the things that we are thinking that maybe we should do something, but we're not doing anything. Then there are some of us who are observing other people do something and commenting on it. And it's always not positive, right? And then there is us. We are constantly doing something. And I know that it is not a very easy place to be, because I'm also sometimes I get tired of being positive. Because how long can you be this person, right? Because we're all waiting for something to change. How has this impacted you, and how has this changed you as a person from somebody who's always high energy? You have an adrenaline rush, right, every time you go into conflict zones, and here you are stuck on a barge in the middle of London. No, I'm serious. And things have really changed for you. So how are you managing that, apart from the eggs news?
Do you know, uh, this is something those that are close to me won't be surprised to hear me say, but I've realized I've made friends with myself over the last few months. Being on the road or working really hard, you know what it's like. You very rarely sort of stand still. You're always waiting for the next big thing. You're chasing the next story, or you're trying to get a team in and out of somewhere, or there's always something going on. And even when you're not doing the day job, you've probably got a couple of projects bubbling underneath that you're trying to get off the ground. There's always something, and all of that it was like falling off a cliff. Everything just went, and all of the things that I had been working on totally disappeared. And so, I suppose I did what a lot of people did. I looked for other things. So, tried building furniture. I've tiled or painted or varnished everything on the barge now, probably twice. And pace just got slower and slower and slower. And then I started to realize that I was not bad company with myself, and I was trying to, I suppose, give myself more of a hug in many respects, whether it be cooking nice food. And I make sure I cook every evening. I don't just grab some rubbish. It's a ritual, and it's good for the soul. Food is always good. Try not to drink much. Now and again I do, but I try not to. But I try to spend some time, whether it's picking up a book or just a magazine. I play the classical guitar, which I haven't done for so many years. So I started doing that again. Growing tomatoes, there's no adrenaline growing tomatoes, but it seems to be working for me right now.
Amazing. And in this, you did a 1 hour special, didn't you, about the country that beats the virus? And you said that what can Britain learn from this, from South
Yeah.
Africa, Korea. So tell us
Yeah.
more about that.
When the series that I was working on collapsed because we had to pull the teams back from wherever they were, the budget that we had left for the 6-part series, the channel basically gave us to make a film about South Korea. And so we managed to get a couple of teams out in South Korea to film for us, and then we did a lot of work here. So from my kitchen, we basically ran a 60-minute documentary we produced about exactly how you compare how the South Koreans approached the virus and how the Brits approached it. And the shocking difference is, the Guardian called it humiliating for the British government. And it is in so many ways that straight off the bat, the Koreans went tests. They got a test. They ordered a test to be developed in January.
Wow.
A test that they could roll out across the country, and their test, track and isolate was brought in so quickly, and they've managed to keep the numbers down to under 300. And compared to where we're at now and where things are going to end up at the end of all of this, it's humbling. It's really humbling, and I think in many respects we need to be learning that lesson so loudly that Britain has to forget where we were in the past and realize where we are now. And that is learning from the rest of the world as to when something like this happens, you look to the people who know what they're doing. And the Koreans had already had MERS, they'd had SARS, they'd already worked out what their battle plan would be if this kind of virus came upon them. Our plan was for flu. Useless.
Yeah.
Terrible.
And here we're waiting for the second wave, Sue, in England, the UK.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's talking about the second wave. I don't want to get political, but I don't see any way of avoiding it, because the way we are behaving right now, and the lack really of things in place to stop it. We know that the thing doesn't like the hot weather, but it likes the cold weather. So when things start to get colder and colder here, and we haven't snuffed it out, and it's still all over the place, and I just don't see how we're going to escape it, to be honest.
Yeah, it's very scary, right, for all of us here who are living here. But let's see. Hey, I've got one question from Louise Farrington, and then I'm going to have one question from me before we end it. And I know we've gone over time, so thanks for your time. So Louise Farrington says, what are you hoping to do now as we come out of lockdown?
Well, one of the other byproducts of that tweet was the controller of BBC Sounds, which is the podcast and the radio and everything else app that we have in the UK. And he said, can you come up with an idea for a podcast series, an investigative podcast series? So I did, and they liked it. So I'm waiting to hear, hopefully the end of this week, that they're going to commission it. So I'm going to be very busy on that with any luck. And then after that, possibly back on the road again. I've been pitching a couple of documentaries, and one's in India, one's in Pakistan. So fingers crossed.
Yes.
When I can get on a plane, I will be.
We know that, and Sue is available for talks online, as you all know. And if anybody's interested, please write to us. Sue is the person to talk to for anything that will draw a parallel between the war zone, conflict zone, and corporate life. Now, Sue, one question from me. If you were given an opportunity or a choice, it's not an opportunity, it's a choice of being in the beaches of England, where you have hundreds of thousands on a nice sunny day, or going to war, where would you go?
You know the answer to that, Raga.
Don't tell me. I don't want to know. Are you going to go to war? Are you going to go to a conflict zone?
Oh yeah, I mean, we call it war, but it's places where people's lives are in danger. So it's conflict, or it could be. It could be an earthquake, or it's somewhere where life has suddenly got very, very tough, and we should all be worried about the people that are involved. That's the idea, really. So it's not necessarily getting shot at, but it is trying to tell stories that need to be told.
And stories that may risk your life, right? You don't care about that anymore. It's about the feeling that it brings to you.
No, I mean, I like living. I'm not looking
we want to see that bad.
But yeah, I suppose you're in the end you're looking for somewhere that has something about it that maybe other people might not want to cover. But yeah, I'm up for it.
Fantastic, Sue. And Sue, I just say, give you a few compliments from Indrani Das, who says, awesome session, amazing inspiration. She says, Patrick says something, when are you going to report Kashmir? And I'm not sure you want to respond to that right now because you're in London,
If
Kashmir.
no, if I could get into Kashmir, I'd be there like a shot. It's not very easy for us journalists, I'm afraid.
Marcy Julie says, amazing women, inspirational. Thank you. And Sue, no, feels the same. Ila Arun, the lady performer I spoke to you about, the folklore, she's still here. She says, both of you come to India. Thanks a lot for this very inspirational session. Thank you, Ila ji. Really means a lot to us. And Sue, before we let you go, I want to know one last thing. Is India something that you want to come back to? If I was to give you a choice about going back to India and say, let's go for a 15-day trip to India.
Gosh,
Forget
yeah,
COVID.
like the drop of a hat. No, we had a fantastic time when I came last time. Met some amazing people. And what about that lovely night in that fort? Do you remember that?
Oh my God, the Jaipur Fort. I mean, how would I forget? I mean, what a fantastic time. And every time we've talked to Sue, it's been so beautiful, so heartwarming. Sue, I cannot tell you how much I love you, but please keep sitting while I keep standing so we are the same height. But but really fantastic. Anybody has any questions for Sue, please respond. Please write to us here on this Facebook page. I'm sure Sue will be very happy to respond to each one of you. Thank you, Sue, for an amazing session. And I hope that you stay alive for us, even if you go to a war zone, because we love your stories. And just one last thing. Where will we find that story that you did for Channel 4? Was it for Channel 4, right? The Korea story?
It was, yeah. If you go on the All For, the Catch Up All For website, it's called The Country That Beat the Virus. That's as simple as that.
Okay. So wonderful. Thank you, my fantastic audience. You're always here supporting us. Fantastic engagement. Please write to us. You know where to find me, Speaking Minds Global or at Totally Out Now. Sue Turton is available on Sue Turton. Please follow her tweets at least. That's Egg News. Share your photographs of what you do every day, what breakfast you have, what you have for breakfast. Sue, you will keep engaged, right? You'll keep them engaged, right?
I will try.
Yeah. So thank you very much. And from tomorrow, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to have eggs for breakfast as well. Thank you so much, Sue. Thank you very much. And Nicola Fenton, who is behind the scenes helping us with this Facebook
Thanks,
Live.
Nicola.
Thank you very much. All at Speaking Minds. Thank you very much. My audience, I love you. Sue, I love you more. And we will see you back on Tuesday, 7th July with, do you want to know who I'm coming back with? 1, 2, 3. Manoj Bajpayee. We'll see you at 8:30 India time, 4 p.m. UK time. He's a very big Bollywood actor. For Sue, if you don't know him, Manoj Bajpayee, The Family Man, and Bhosle. We'll see you on 7 July, 8:30. And thank you so much, Sue. Lots of love and namaste from India and London.